So I went to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting, and it's a mutual help recovery meeting for individuals affected by compulsive gambling or gambling related problems. And they used the Yellow Combo book as their curriculum, and they read it out loud during the meeting. And the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop gambling. There was no dues, and there were no fees for membership. Now, this meeting took place virtually, and it was held online on a Sunday, June 7th, 2026, at 7 p.m. Pacific Time. During the Sunday meeting, I arrived 10 minutes early to ensure I was there throughout the entire process, from beginning to end. Most members would begin their statements with, "Hello, my name is," redacted, obviously, "I'm a compulsive gambler. My last date of gambling was blank date," as a way for acceptance concession, because they're admitting to their addiction. And this is considered the first step of recovery, which is basically acceptance in the phase of processing. And the group demographics, without including personal identifying information, PII, I can only describe the members' demographics generally because the crucial part of protecting personal privacy is the anonymity, the anonymous quality of the meeting. Therefore, I didn't record any of the names, I didn't record any of the usernames, locations, occupations, or personal or any other PII. The purpose of my observation is educational in nature, and I must avoid compromising any attendee's privacy. Furthermore, many didn't show themselves on camera, and some only presented profile pictures of themselves, presumably, or as a professional sort of a picture, maybe headshots, instead of appearing on camera, they had a picture of themselves. And also some of them had pictures of their pets, or maybe with their kids too. And the group seemed to have over 40 current attendees, maybe 30 to 40, and some would come and some would go, because it was around an hour and a half meeting. So, and some seemed like they were at work, listening in the meeting, but virtually while they're at work, or maybe during a break at work. Because people from different parts of the world can sign into different virtual meetings based on the time. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're local, it's more of who can attend that time. And from discussions, it seemed like some were there voluntarily, and others were there from some sort of involuntary, unspecified legal directive that they are not. And even if they did disclose it, it seems like I should not really disclose any sort of legal problems that any of them are in, and a lot of them were advised to kind of keep some of their legal logistics out of really the discussion. Also, their financial stuff, they kind of have to leave out of it because they don't want people to talk too much about money. More about the addiction and trying to stop gambling. And the leader was a black lady appearing in her 50s, I would say. And she runs the groups on Sundays, usually. While on all the other days, Gamblers Anonymous, which is GA, meets with possible different group leaders on each day. And it's as best fits each individual to show up on the days that they want to. Some of them show up every day as almost like religiously. Some of them show up as like part of their like growth group. And there were some Hispanics members, and they seemed to bond with each other. And the meeting only had one new person who was Hispanic, whom the group allowed extra time to discuss the new member's perspective, including having the new member answer a 20-question compulsive gambler assessment. So that was the instrument that they used, and it has to be either 7 or more symptoms on that item list for them to basically be perceived as a positive reading that yes, they do have compulsive gambling, enough for them to be considered an addict. But obviously they're not diagnosing there, but they're basically trying to talk to each other like from addict to addict. Hey, yeah, we kind of, from this book, this is what we kind of know. Now, I don't know if it would like hold up in court or not. That's the question I have on how much of Gamblers Anonymous affects a person's like legal standing. That is a question that I don't think I can really answer unless if I explored like a one-to-one with a person that is an actual addict. I would have a lot of questions for them. But getting back to it, there's mostly white older individuals, so the vast majority of them were in their 50s and 60s, white older, and they had a smaller number of younger individuals, the youngest appearing in their mid-30s. The group seems around 50-50 male and female, with more males appearing as willing to be on camera than the females in the group. And I would guess if they're male or female based on just the name, and I don't want to obviously don't want to give up their name, but I would reason that it seemed like there was around half and half that was there, but I could be wrong. And so anyway, the welcome introductions and content, my reaction to that is that it was very informative welcome. She explained her whole entire frame of how she was going to run the group, and that they were going to do introductions, and that they were going to do a book reading. And this week's theme from the book and kind of the going conversation people were having, that it was surrounded, it is pertaining to the emotion of guilt that gambling comes with. And guilt emotionally taxes a person until they want to feel the relief through the rush of gambling. And so perhaps they might think to themselves that gambling is not that big of a deal, or it's too late to stop. And a lot of this is just my speculation, so and I don't want to give up too much of what they specifically said, because some of them were giving like narratives about their life, but perhaps they might think to themselves that gambling is not that big of a deal, and that sometimes they think to themselves that guilt of it's just too late, I should just keep going anyway, it's already too late for me, and then they go for it because they think it's kind of their destiny to do it. And a common theme is they resort to gambling from after a very heavy experience, such as losing a relationship or death, which is another loss of relationship, and death in the family seem to be the main, parents specifically seem to be the most of it, but there was relationship losses like divorce, and some of them have alcohol as like another component. So it's multiple addictions, so they have a substance relating to their life in addition to a relationship with gambling. And it's pretty heavy, that some of the stuff that they talk about, and that one major theme that I noticed was that the idea of character change is required within oneself. And the meeting and reading material described spirituality as involving higher human qualities, such as humility, honesty, hope, and willingness to change. And I interpreted this as a recovery process that is not only about stopping gambling behavior, but also about changing the emotional and personal patterns that habitually continue the gambling cycle. Another idea that stood out was the importance of conceding or accepting that one is a compulsive gambler as part of the first step of recovery. The material described a kind of delusion where a compulsive gambler could believe that they could gamble like others that they know. Like, oh, everybody else does it, I can do it also. And that they think that they won't lose control. And that the dynamic seems similar to the clinical idea of pattern denial or behavior minimization, where they say it's not that big of a deal, or they're like, it's not really happening that often, even though it's like once or twice a week, not realizing that's kind of a lot of times to gamble, in my perspective at least. It also depends on how they're gambling. I lost my place in my reading here. Gambling cycle. Habitually continue the gambling cycle, correct. And another idea that stood out was the importance of conceding or accepting that one is a compulsive gambler as the first step of recovery. The material described a kind of delusion where the compulsive gambler could believe that they could gamble like the others without losing control. So that's where I was before. And now this dynamic seems similar to the clinical idea of pattern denial and minimization. And from my perspective, the meeting emphasizes that only typical effort or simple willpower just might not be enough. Once gambling has escalated to the point of having a complicated compulsion that is a whole entire process that's very sophisticated, and even there's a lot of gambling websites that they try to decrease as many obstacles as possible for the end user. So when someone wants to gamble, they try to set it up where it's almost on accident. They are going to just starting to gamble because of how easy they want it to be and how alluring and sparkly everything is. Because they are affecting a large parts of the brain that are responsible, like dopamine receptors. I think I get into that later here in my notes. So that emphasizes that so the meeting talks about only typical effort or simple willpower might not be enough once gambling has escalated to a complicated compulsion. The curriculum seems to discuss recovery as requiring a stronger than typical effort, super powerful level of intense intentions, acceptance, accountability, and support from a higher power, especially for those with religiosity. And some people aren't religious there, and some people there did note that they're not religious, but they are still attending even with the religious undertones. And my thoughts and feelings during the meeting. Well, I've already attended two other meetings, but an Alcoholics Anonymous, which is AA, and Narcotics Anonymous, which is NA, while going through my psychiatric trade school licensing clinicals in the past. And this is almost over 10 years ago. But I haven't done any process addictions before. And so I wanted to do a process addiction instead of just a substance addiction because I've already done 2 different substance addictions meetings and no process addiction meetings yet. So I wanted to make sure I can diversify my experience and what I've seen before. Especially since near I live, there's a ton of casinos, so my clientele might involve some of those clients. Gamblers preoccupy themselves with fantasies of making it big while in a reckless desperation. While they might achieve a win, their dreams of winning big get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it never stops. And the risks increase for the chances to get those dreams. And much of a compulsive gambler's time involves delusions of grandeur in those dreams of winning that preoccupy their time that could have been used more constructively. So they're wasting their time and their energy. And compulsive gambling was mentioned as an emotional problem an emotional problem instead of a financial problem, because regardless of financial position, compulsive gamblers will gamble away any amount of money according to their unconstrained emotions and lack of adaptive coping mechanisms, such as death in the family, or other sorts of processes that might cascade into compulsive gambling processes. Because sometimes it doesn't just happen overnight, sometimes it takes time for some of these things to grow. And it seems that they treat gambling similar to a substance, even though it's a process addiction. And some of the members discussed that they reached a point of praying about their problem, even when they don't know who or what they're praying to, because they feel such a heavy weight that they might never make it out of their compulsions without superpowers from others or themselves or somewhere, somehow, some way. And the role of addiction meetings for treatment, I think that GA's Gambling Anonymous describes itself as a fellowship where members share experiences, strength, struggles, and hope to help themselves and others recover from the process involved with gambling addiction. Therefore, the role of the meeting seems to provide social support and insightful education related to compulsive gambling addiction from others who have experience and knowledge of the gambling cycle. So the conclusion. Overall, this meeting helped me understand that recovery, addiction, is not only about stopping the behavior, it's about trying to develop those characters and qualities like honesty, humility, emotional regulation, connection, and ongoing accountability. I left with a more profound appreciation for the mutual help meetings, that people with similar problems, they come together and they act as a support system for people recovering with process addictions. And so I think that this is an outlet for people that are my clients, that if I'm talking to them and they have an addiction such as gambling or porn addiction, sex addiction, a narcotics addiction, an alcohol addiction, any sort of addiction, I'm sure there's many different ones out there of those that meet that have 12-step programs. This is an option to provide to the client with their consent and whether or not they want to try it out at least. I think that not necessarily commanding them to do it or directing them to do it, but more of just having that be something that I discuss with them as information I provide them, that, hey, this is available. They don't have to do it though, but I think it's good to check it out, and to experiment with trying out new ways of finding new support and changing part of themselves from trying to find people out there that have struggled from some of the same stuff and same problems. And thank you so much for joining me. Take care.